And I'm Evan Novi-Williams, and this is the Aces High Sports Business Podcast, the Sporticast.
Ooh, Evan Novi-Williams, how much you see the smile, Kurt? You see the smile he's got? It bugs me a little bit because that was like he held it in his back pocket. He knew he had something good. He knew he was proud of it.
I did not actually know if this was good or not.
Oh, no, come on.
I was trying to be, there's higher pressure here because we are streaming this live.
First time, right?
On YouTube and on Riverside for the very first time.
Can you look to your left or right to Matt Palacio and Cora Veltman and say, hey, how many people are joining us live on YouTube right now?
I will do that in a little bit. I'm not sure.
Wait, you see him uncomfortably look to the left there? Like, no, you look like you're a real professional there. There's like a little uncomfortable glance to the left. Well, as always, when we do valuations and our WNBA valuations are out, we are joined by Kurt Bodenhausen, who, like I, braved New Jersey Transit this morning. Kurt, once again, system-wide outages. You, like me, I believe, were routed through Hoboken. How many of your sweaty friends did you commute with today?
Oh my gosh, I'm glad I put shorts on today to come into the office. It is hot and sticky. It was crowded. It was the prototypical cattle car.
Now, is it going to be as crowded for people trying to get in on the WNBA right now? That is my question.
Is it hotter than the W?
Yeah, is it hotter than the W? Good way. I mean, you want to give top-line stuff, and then Novi Williams and I will pepper you.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, a lot going on with this league right now. We've heard about the engagement, the attendance, the TV ratings, all that. And we want to do a deep dive and see what's going on with franchise values. And you could argue that in terms of the biggest hockey stick moment for this league, all the other crazy video game-like percentage increases, nothing's more than the WNBA in terms of franchise values. So you think about a team like Las Vegas Aces. Mark Davis paid $2 million for that franchise. $2 million only 3 years ago.
Yeah.
3 years ago. It is number one on our list at $140 million. Average team worth $96 million. You've got three really up right at the top have separated themselves. Aces, Seattle Storm, New York Liberty, kind of all really bunched together. Storm at $135 million. Liberty at $130 million. And then you go all the way down. Atlanta Dream, who are really off by themselves. You think about that as really a stick value to get into this league right now, $55 million. You buy the Dream, you're going to have to invest a ton of money. You're going to have to build a practice facility. You're going to have to figure out a new arena situation. So the all-in cost, if you're looking to buy a franchise like that, you're looking at 9 figures.
Hardly the dream. Hardly the dream scenario when you have to go and build a practice facility. But that's what we've seen from the WNBA now. There's an expectation of, the private travel, the charter. There is our own practice facility. Everything is upgraded. And let me be crazy hyperbolic. Why not? Because it's just fun. Will Mark Davis one day look back and say, wow, I never thought my WNBA team would be a better investment than my NFL team?
Well, 70x in 3 years is good.
You're off to a good start.
Very good.
A good start.
The Raiders, again, the Davis family knows something about getting in on the ground floor of a good investment. Al Davis originally bought 10% of the Raiders at a $185,000 valuation in 1966. He eventually gained more control, accumulated a higher ownership share, and eventually became the control owner.
You couldn't buy the contents of the equipment shed for $185,000 these days.
No. $5.8 billion is what we value the Raiders at right now. So that has been a very, very
Wait, time
good
out.
investment.
Hold on, Evan. I know you wanted to. Time out, Kurt. Now, I just threw that out of nowhere. Like, did you do that from memory, the $5.8 billion on the Raiders, or are you looking at it somewhere? Or did you happen to see it? Like, you were just like out of nowhere. It's like this encyclopedic recall of what the Raiders are worth.
Well,
the man who does the numbers.
I know, but that's pretty good recall right there.
Well, I just wrote about it, and it's in the lead of our WNBA team valuation story right now. So
I didn't know if you were. I forget things from 10 minutes ago, dude. So and Evan will vouch for that. I'll tell you, like, what was I just? He's all the time. I have shown him this more than once. That I'll open up an email screen. He will look to his right and say something to me. I will answer. I will turn back to my screen and go, what was I doing? I know I had to send an email to someone, but I have no idea what it was.
No. I'm with you. No,
some point-
incredible appreciation for the Raiders, and incredible what's happened with the Aces.
At some point, not today, we got to do put Kurt on the hot seat like they do Sean McVay and ask him like random,
Yes.
very specific questions about valuations of years past and see how encyclopedic the knowledge is. I want to take a step back here for a second to talk about, Kurt, the structure of the WNBA, because I think even a lot of avid fans don't really understand the relationship between the NBA, the WNBA, where the equity sits between team owners and the NBA as a whole. My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong here, for a while it was 50-50. The NBA had 50% of the equity, and then the 12 teams had the other 50%. Some of them also NBA owners, so a little bit of double dipping there. Then the league raised money, 16% equity raise last year or 2 years ago with some pretty star-studded investors. Diluted both sides by 8%. So now it's 42% the NBA, 42% the team owners, and then 16% this group of investors. Is that right? And then if so, what is the financial relationship continuing? What money flows year over year from the NBA to the WNBA teams?
Yeah, and if you go back originally, this was a single entity structure where it was completely owned by the NBA, and a group of NBA owners who had NBA City. They basically were granted the right to operate these franchises.
Some had to have their arms twisted. David Stern had to twist some arms to say, "I need you to take a franchise." Many eventually just got tired of the losses and said, "We need to open this up because we don't want these teams on our balance sheets."
Yeah, half a dozen teams folded. James Dolan, we saw, was never a huge fan.
They were playing in a high school gym practically in Westchester.
Yeah, so eventually David Stern, he eventually gifted them these franchises after they had been operating them for a decade. And then the structure was split 50-50 in terms of the league equity. And so what that really means is, if you're talking about the top line economics at the league level, so those league media deals, those league sponsorship deals, NBA owners have a right to 42% of that revenue. This consortium from 2022, and so that was really negotiated in 2021 when this league was reeling from COVID. It was announced in early 2022, but basically everything was worked out in 2021 when the league really needed to raise money. But they raised the $75 million with the idea of investing, really building out marketing, building out how we're going to promote these players, really building out an infrastructure that didn't exist on the league level. It was kind of the NBA just helping out, really. And so this was the WNBA going from one marketing person to 25 marketing people, hiring a chief growth officer, hiring a chief marketing officer for the first time. And so that those investors are entitled really to 16% of those league revenues. And so it's obviously a big topic of conversation as we think about the TV renewal right now, because it's going to be multiple times of what the old one is, but only 42% of it is going to filter down to existing teams. So each team owns, right now, the 12 teams, each owns 3.5% of the economics. When they move to 14 teams with Golden State and Toronto, each team will have 3%.
Interesting too, Evan, I know you like to point out, among those investors in the consortium is Nike. The people don't know how this whole enterprise works,
Nike,
right?
Lorene Powell Jobs,
Well, and it's interesting, you have really guys who really triple dipped in. You talk about double dipping, Evan, because they owned a WNBA team, they owned an NBA team, but you had Joe and Clara Tsai, who already own them. They were involved. Herb Simon was involved. Ted Lee owns this. So they're all, again, they're all triple dipping in terms of what's happening with the WNBA right now.
And they were among those that never had arm twisted. They were committed to women's sports early on. And I'm not sure if they saw sort of the financial returns. I don't know. Or if sort of Ted and Herb and Joe just saw it as we want to support women's sports. But certainly moving forward, they will be enjoying the increased valuation and revenues that flow.
In my mind, when I think about the WNBA, the biggest question right now is how much of the increased interest that we've seen in the past 6 months, how much of it is permanent and how much of it is temporary, given new faces that are coming into the league.
Wait, say the
when you're-
name. What do you mean, new faces coming into the
Caitlin
league?
Clark,
Come
Angel
on,
Reese, whatever
new
you wanna
faces
call it.
coming into the league.
The attendance, I don't believe it's quite up to the early 1996 or 97 levels, but it's the highest it's been in a long time. TV ratings are up, sponsorship, all that stuff is up. When you're putting these numbers together, Kurt, how much are you kind of trying to, or are you just not trying to kind of predict or think about the volatility or how tenuous maybe some of that interest is? Are you trying to value it what it was now, what it was 6 months ago, before all this? How do you balance the kind of how hot and maybe tenuous some of that money is?
Yeah, it's a great point. It's something we've thought about a lot, and we've talked to everybody. No different than when we talk to people about MLS and Lionel Messi coming to MLS and introducing a whole new group of fans that have never tried this product out, have never watched a game, have never attended a game. And now it is on MLS to keep a certain percentage of those. And it's not going to keep 100%. It's not going to keep zero. Same applies to the WNBA. They recognize that they have an opportunity now. And so you think about the Indiana Fever. I mean, they averaged 4,000 fans a game last year. They're going to sell out their games this year. They're going to average somewhere close to 17,000. It's an entirely new situation for this league. And they've got to work. And they know this. They have to work to retain these fans because you have to give them a good experience. And so they want to come back and try it a second time, try it a third time. So it's not going to be 100% and it's not going to be 0%. It's going to be somewhere in the middle. And honestly, time will tell. We value teams' multiples of revenue, how bankers typically look at this. We're looking at 2023 revenue. 2024 is a totally different situation. So we took a... And while some of the numbers might look eye-popping to people, we took a relatively conservative approach. 7 times 2023 revenue. You look at 2024 revenue, it'll probably be somewhere around 5.5.
5. I was going to say 5. Good for me.
So, because revenue is going to be up at least 30% this year, and then you have the new TV deal kicking in. So these valuations, again, are thinking about this being a somewhat new normal because you're going to keep some of these fans. You're going to have a new TV money kicking in. So that's how we really approached it.
So you mentioned the Fever in there, Caitlin Clark's team, obviously. You have them at 6th, $90 million valuation, despite having the second lowest revenue in the league in 2023. Maybe an impossible question, but what would this team be worth, or where would it be ranked? Do you know if Caitlin Clark... If there was no Caitlin Clark, I'm curious how much of
I think
her
it's at
is
the
baked into that.
I think it's at the bottom. I mean,
Yeah,
if you think about their,
incredible.
if you think about the Atlanta Dream, their revenues, we had them at $8.8 million last year. That's where the Fever were. They're just a tick above that. And small market, limited upside and limited investors maybe. It's not New York. It's not LA. It's not the Bay Area. And so, but Caitlin Clark changed the conversation and the path for this franchise. No different than LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers.
I was going to ask if you've ever seen anything like this. Obviously, different number scale, but a single player coming in and
a single
overnight
player
changing a number like that.
Yeah, and again, if you think about, again, we haven't had NBA teams that are only drawing 25% capacity at their arena. So you could argue that we've never seen something like this to go from 4,000 fans to 17,000 fans every game. That's not an option in the NBA. So and they're probably the hardest team to value because if you gave people a chance, wouldn't you want to maybe? You could argue Indiana Fever should be first if you want to get on this for the next 10 years and be a part of this momentum. If you believe that this is a sustainable momentum.
Well, the indication for me would be we're not really relying on ticket sales right now and the fickle nature of the sports fan. The two biggest drivers of revenue for sports leagues, and you can take the NBA, whatever, we're talking about media and we're talking about sponsorship. What do we know about the media? That'll be a multi-year deal at some large increase. That money's there, right? That's going to be for the next several years. What we hear from people like Marty Bly at Group M, he's got big-time clients like Google saying, we're ready to commit to women's sports. And the difference here now is you've got data backing it up. Who has purchasing power? You're giving these companies reasons, multiple reasons, to believe in women's sports and to put those sponsorship dollars behind it. That is not going to be an ephemeral spend. You're looking at a multi-year spend from a lot of these companies. So I'm looking for sort of the risk range here. I would put it rather low because the two biggest factors in revenue, I think we all can see, are going to be multi-year fire hoses.
Yeah, listen, those two are, but I wouldn't discount tickets. I mean, this is still very much
It matters, yeah. It matters.
because this is this is a very much a gate-driven league still. That media revenue is going to trickle down, and it is real revenue. I mean, this is a check, but they're only getting 42% of it. So it's not, they're not going to get this whole, we're maybe $150 million deal where the next one could potentially be. So 100% that's not going to filter down. But the sponsorship conversations, to your point, are totally different. I talked to Jess Smith, who was head of revenue at Angel City, and she talked about before she joined the Valkyries and is taking over as president of the new expansion team in the Bay Area. And she said, she talked about those conversations she used to have originally with the Valkyries, and she said it was an education process. She would have to walk in, explain to people, educate them. These are the numbers, these are the valuations. And she said it was hard. She said now she's walking in the Bay Area, having those conversations with sponsors, and they get the data, they get what's going on, they get the numbers, and they want to be on board. And the conversation now has changed to, how can we be a part of this? What can we do together? And it's not that education process.
For folks who are listening live on YouTube, there is a chat function. Pop a question in and bear with us as we work out the kinks here, but we'll try to get Kurt or Scott or me to weigh in.
Can I raise an objection? I want to weigh in on something, Novi Williams.
Yeah, go ahead.
And it's probably a platform thing, but how come the S over the S in Williams is really big and circled there? Is that a platform thing?
That's the Sportico logo, yeah.
I mean, we put it right on, that's the Sportico logo? Not the one I know.
That's I guess the Sporticast logo.
That's
maybe.
the Sporticast logo. So they chose it to put it on the S of your name as if you're some
I think that's just
superhero.
view, I think.
Look at Kurt. Look at Kurt. Look at your font, Kurt. You and I. I even have a lowercase s. I have no capitals whatsoever. I feel as if I've been cheated here. Just any. You know weird things. Oh, there it is. That's much better. Was that Cora popping that in there? Thank you,
Matt.
Cora Veltman. Oh, Matt. All right, Palacio. Well done. Thank you.
Okay, back on topic. Kurt, you mentioned Angel City. I actually have a bunch of questions kind of thinking about WNBA and NWSL. Obviously, very different leagues, women's sports on the rise across. One of the things that I found interesting, the WNBA teams on average, more valuable. Also on average, pretty decent a chunk more revenue. They're both going through expansion right now. The WNBA is selling its two most recent expansion teams $50 million expansion fee. The NWSL $53 million expansion fee. How do you think about the health of these two leagues from a business standpoint? Should the WNBA expansion fee be higher? Should the NWSL be lower? How do you square the fact that they actually seem to be in slightly different camps economically, and yet the NWSL's expansion fee is bigger?
It's a great point. It's something we thought about a lot from a valuation standpoint. And there's an argument to be made that the WNBA really prioritized market ownership group arena situation well ahead of price when they locked in deals with the Warriors group as well as with Larry Tannenbaum. Those two ownership groups, very influential in the NBA. And we're ready to get behind this league, and really, and they're going to both going to knock it out of the park. Yeah. We talked to bankers who basically said Bay Area is going, the Golden State Valkyries are going to be the Angel City of this league.
Quote, yeah.
They're going to do 30 million plus in revenue, and that's where Angel City is. They very quickly will be the most valuable team in this league. Similar to what the Warriors are, because of the market and because they will generate a ton of revenue. And so I think there's an argument to be made. Both leagues are on an incredible growth trajectory, and I think both are looking at substantially higher expansion fees when they both do their next deals, which could come over the next 6 months. There's so much demand in the marketplace. NWSL talking about doing one more expansion fee for now, one more expansion team for now, will command a lot. And WNBA, you have Portland seems to be the likely leader right now for one of the franchises, and then one more. There's a lot of competition to land that spot.
And don't
So
forget.
just
Go ahead.
unpack that real quick. The Golden State Warriors are paying a $50 million expansion fee to get the Valkyries into WNBA. There's obviously a lot of other costs associated with launching this team, and I don't want to overlook that.
Yeah.
But you're essentially saying that instantaneously, this team is going to be the most valuable team in the league, is going to be worth, just let's put it ahead of the Aces, somewhere in the $150 to $200 million range, right? This sounds like a tremendous deal if you're Joe Lacob and you're the Golden State Warriors. Again, there is upfront cost here beyond the $50 million, but it's not going to offset the fact that your team, it sounds like almost instantaneously, is going to be worth 3 to 4 times the expansion fee that you paid.
Yeah, I think they got a great deal. You look at Toronto, 115 million is expected to be the cost. The Warriors are not building a practice facility from scratch. They're retrofitting, renovating the Warriors' old practice facility for the Valkyries. But there are substantial upfront costs, whether you're talking about WNBA or NWSL. Sixth Street talks about spending $125 million for the NWSL club in the Bay Area. But yeah, I Joe Lacob and Peter Guber they could have squeezed a few more dollars out. But thinking about the long-term growth, I think they again prioritize market, prioritize ownership group, prioritize the facility to the overall health of the league in terms of who could bring the most bang for the buck.
Yeah, it was clear for a while the leagues were prioritizing the who over the how much. And that's an important thing if you're talking about sustained excellence. And just from serendipity standpoint, if I'm a current investor in one of these leagues or a recent investor, not that you want any strife in any franchises or whatever, but the fact remains that Angel City is on the market right now for a new control owner. And if you're going to have sort of your highest revenue club out there putting a valuation on something, you want it to be your top dog, and that's what we're going to see from Angel City. I mean, would you be surprised if somebody pays upwards of $200+ million for control of Angel City? I mean, that does have a lifts all boats effect.
It's certainly reasonable.
Me.
Not at all. You're buying the premier franchise financially in a league that is going through a tremendous improvement in terms of visibility and basically any metric you could pick. So 200 plus wouldn't surprise me at all when we're thinking about and to be that person. We see it's a fun. We talk about this dynamic where we have these LP premiums sometimes in these smaller leagues because you just want to be an owner, but being a control owner of Angel City is an extremely valuable proposition. I mean, it's still losing money despite their high revenue, but once the expenses get under control, you're looking at a franchise that can also be cash flow positive, which you don't always see with startup leagues.
Worth noting that there are some WNBA teams that are already cash flow positive, correct? I think you mentioned Seattle being one of them. I don't know how many others there are, but that actually seems like an important note in terms of thinking about the financial health at these numbers for a lot of these teams.
Yeah, overall the league is losing money, and again, adding a $25 million expense for annual expense for a charter program. I mean, that is a significant amount of money to spend. But for 2023, you had multiple franchises that were cash flow positive. Seattle was certainly one of them. The revenue was, in terms of regular season revenue, was the highest in the league, and have had despite not doing very well on the court. But they've had a very kind of stable revenue streams over the last few years.
We've got a number of comments on social media, I don't know if it's YouTube or Twitter, about the Chicago Sky and their lack of a facility. I'm not sure if that's practice facility or playing venue.
It's a practice facility.
Yeah, if you don't mind diving in a little bit on what you expect or what you think that ownership group, which recently sold a decent-sized minority stake, what do you expect there? Angel Reese's team, obviously a lot of eyeballs on them as well.
Yeah, I think we've seen it with the Aces have built their own practice facility. The Seattle Storm opened a $64 million practice facility. Toronto's going to build a standalone practice facility. That's going to be the expectation now. Players are going to look around the league and say, who is prioritizing this? Phoenix is doing a new practice facility and headquarters for the Suns and Mercury. And so that is the new expectation. If we're going to continue on this growth trajectory, there has to be investment. So again, you could be looking at bigger losses over the next couple of years as those investments are made. But you got to spend money to make money, as the cliche goes. So I think you are going to see, again, and any club that changes hands, the WNBA will be looking for the new owners to build standalone practice facilities for these teams.
What are the two of you, and Scott, I want your opinion here too. What do you guys expect labor-wise in the W in the next 2 years? They signed a new CBA a couple years ago. It was a hallmark moment, not just for the league, but for women's sports as a whole. If I'm a WNBA player, I'm seeing a whole lot of attention around the commercial growth of the league. I'm going to Sportico.com. I'm reading Kurt's story. I'm looking at Kurt's numbers and thinking, wow, our owners are getting pretty rich right now. They have an opt-out, from what I understand, next year, I believe, or maybe in 2 seasons. Whatever it is, it seems pretty likely that they're going to choose to do that. Is there a chance this gets ugly? What do you think about how big a hurdle is that potentially for owners as we look towards the long-term health of the league beyond the next 2 years?
I like the pretty likely they will, though it is 100% definitely they will opt out of the current labor contract. Much of what Kurt has said, and remember, I have covered, I can't even count how many labor fights at this point, and they are always about decimal points. Regardless, when people say they care about things like commissioner power and punishment, no, it's just a decimal point thing. David Stern, David had an ego and wanted to win with a decimal point. That's how he gauged success. Moving it to the left one more in his favor in percentages. My guess would be, Eben, that in the nascent success of this league, there is widespread recognition that there is an opportunity here for owners and players. Players will certainly want a bigger share of revenue, and we have to see the current structure might make it difficult, but a larger percentage, whatever it may be. They will be made to understand, I can tell you, that there are still losses, that there have been significant investments that are still required on the ownership side, and that some of these owners have been involved for quite some time, losing money on an annual basis. So my guess would be that on this one, on the WNBA, that cooler heads will prevail, that will ultimately result in a deal of obviously a greater percentage of more revenue, bigger pie, going to the players, perhaps with some targets that could even move even further, and that the WNBA owners at this point certainly would not want to anger, let's say, the Caitlin Clarks and Angel Reeses of the world, and have them at this stage of the career become so ardent on the union label that there's a great mistrust of ownership, because that would prove damaging moving forward. Kurt, tell me how right I was.
No, right on.
What
he said.
Oh, when you said no, I was like, what do you mean I'm wrong? Wait, what?
No, what he said. But if you think about the last, labor deal, and so they have an opt-out so they can exercise their opt-out after this year, so where they will play next year, and then the agreement will be over. And so I think if you think about when the last labor deal was done, coming out of COVID, and just the challenging environment, it's a whole new situation here where we think about the opportunity, and the pie is much bigger. And so the reality is you have these locked-in expenses that are there, whether you're $100 million a year sports team or a $2 million a year sports team. To operate a basketball arena costs a certain amount of money, to turn on the lights and to operate it for every game. And so that's the calculus. When people say 50-50, 50-50, why don't we get 50% like the other sports leagues? There isn't enough revenue to cover those other expenses, and without absolutely massive losses. So the pie is much bigger now. I think you'll certainly see a larger shift of overall revenue go towards the players. And I think there's a situation similar to what we've seen with the NBA over recent years, where things are going well. We need to figure out a solution to make everybody happy, because there is momentum. The last thing we want is to stunt that momentum, because everybody loses with a labor fight, particularly if you have this kind of momentum behind you right now.
And Evan, as we've talked about in the past, one of the big drivers of the impetus of the NFL media contract was that it was preceded by the labor contract.
Of course.
The network streaming services, whoever they may be, they love nothing more than certainty that there will be no interruption to seasons. That is for sure, and that helps drive the price higher too.
And to your point earlier, Kurt, in the NFL, essentially every team gets 1/32 of the overall revenue. The way the WNBA is structured, it's not the same way. Not every team doesn't get a 12th of the revenue coming in, right? Because there's two other actually equity holders in the league as well. So the economics work out a little differently. A couple other things that jumped out to me, Kurt, from your story that I just kind of want to highlight. One, you mentioned, I assume this was for the game against the Fever. The Liberty had a home game this year that did a $2 million gate. That's got to be on par with a Nets game, or fairly close, I would think, right? To what a Nets game at the Barclays Center is doing.
Yeah. I mean, that's the top tier. I mean, Golden State's by itself. The Warriors are by themselves in terms of what they're doing at gate. So they do a $4 million gate,
Every game.
and then you drop down very far, not very far. Lakers and Knicks, you're talking about $3 million, and then it drops down from there. The Knicks and Lakers are by themselves, so the next group of teams is $2 million to $2.5 million. When you're thinking about the Celtics, Nets, those other big markets. So it's that number, I'll tell you, raised a lot of eyebrows. People were like, I don't even know how that math works. And I can't tell you how. I talked to a few teams who were going back and working through the numbers. And I'm like, wow, if that's really accurate. But my understanding, it is actually what they did for that game. So it speaks to the demand.
And there will be more games at bigger venues, as we've already seen when they started to move some Indiana Fever games into the larger venues.
And along those lines, the other thing I was going to mention, you have in here for this WNBA season, more than half of the games have been sellouts. That's a shocking number to me, especially given, as you said, so many of these teams are moving to significantly bigger venues, not just for games against the Fever, but for games against the Sky and some other teams. I knew numbers were up, but that number also surprised me, that more than half of the WNBA's games we're more than a third of the way through the season, or we're pretty darn close to it at this point, have been sellouts.
Yeah, no, that shocked me as well. You have three teams basically that sold out all their season ticket allotment before the year started. What the
Those
key?
Are the Aces, the
Aces,
Liberty,
Dallas, and Dallas. What will be interesting
Dallas
with
is low
teams?
on your list, right?
Dallas is low on their list. They've sold them out, and Dallas has a lot of upside. So they're moving. They'll be moving into a renovated arena at the convention center. They're moving downtown in 2 years. And so there's a ton of potential there when you start thinking about it. And so to your point, you have 4 arenas that are 7,000 fans or less. And Caitlin Clark has been able to sell out all her games, home, road. The key, I think, is going to be Atlanta's playing in a 3,500 seat arena. Los Angeles is playing in a 4,000 seat arena. Can those teams, and that doesn't work. Those economics don't work. So can you sell out? Can you move those, right size an arena for those teams, be in a 10,000 person arena and continue to have sellouts? Because what's happening is the demand right now is outpacing supply in those smaller venues. And then with Caitlin Clark, everything being a sellout, the number of sellouts is more than doubled versus what we had at this point last year.
Hey, Kurt, you just named the Celtics, by the way. You just said Celtics. I mean, you didn't even give our friend Wick Grossbeck or Steve Pagliuca a shout out to the champion Celtics. Nothing. I got a text from Wick. He's got a great photo here with he and his wife Amelia. She's got an Auerbach-like cigar.
Is there Sincoro in the photo?
Well, it's very funny today that look at how much are they enjoying that championship. But it's very funny because what was my response? Where's the tequila? Response:
right.
Oh yes, it was present. So
It's in the trophy.
yes. Yeah, but going back to something you said earlier, by the way, we're talking about the practice facilities, and I believe you were talking about Chicago, Eben. I was recently with one of the owners, Nadia Rawlinson, where she was departing our meeting early because she had to get to Chicago. I won't give too many specifics, but to have a meeting regarding her practice facility. So it is clearly top of mind for these facilities. Like, if you want to get the best players, you better have the best facilities. That is part of it. It's just part of the equation now. You just absolutely have to have it. So that investment, all owners know that investment has to be made.
I'm going to put you guys on the hot seat here with a gun to your head.
There's
question.
no hot seat. By the way, hold on. Before you put hot seat, you'll laugh at this, Evan. Then you close on hot seat.
Yep.
You will laugh, Kurt, because this happens to you all the time. But I can do it because it was a text message, and I can give you the specific minute. So hold on. 5:04 a.m. Eastern Time. Here, there is a graphic. I won't say which one, but a WNBA owner sent me our graphic of franchise valuations, knowing what is in pipeline, what is coming, what is whatever. Tell Kurt this won't age very well. Your first complaint, your first complaint came at 5:04 a.m. So there you go.
Okay, so let's close on this for both of you. Which league, the WNBA or the NWSL, has a control stake sell at a $500 million valuation first?
Which has a $500 million? I say NWSL. Don't ask me my thinking. It's just the whole World Cup mania coming. The size of venue. Yeah. They're already into their media deal. The big bump increase with tons of partners. They'll get to their next one first. So for those reasons, a number of highly marketable stars across the kind of the soccer landscape. So I'm saying NWSL.
I'll take the WNBA
Okay.
as counterpoint.
Now I feel like I'm going to be wrong. Kurt.
No, you're not. You're not. And again, it's the conversation we've had for the last 6 weeks with people, and you are probably in the majority with saying NWSL. Most people are looking at the NWSL because of global soccer's popularity from a global standpoint, and with everything that's happening in the United States right now and over the next 5 years with soccer. That NWSL has that potential. But when I think about the WNBA, what I like about it, there's no competition for the talent. If I'm at NWSL, I'm a little nervous right now. What's happening in England? If Spain gets more behind their women's teams. Again, there's a reason MLS struggles to attract the best players in the world, because there's a lot of money being spent in Europe on men's soccer. And so, again, I think when you think about that with the WNBA right now, the TV contract, and I know NWSL is thinking about the next TV contract, and that can potentially generate even obviously much higher revenue, and they will get to keep 100% of it. Different than what's happening in the NBA where you are capped. The WNBA where you are capped. But I think the trajectory right now, I'll take the WNBA.
How about this, Evan? Let's go off the board. Let's bring it back to the Celtics owners, where Steve Pagliuca, much like he tried in the lockout years ago in the NHL to buy the whole league, how about a sovereign wealth fund comes over the top with a mega offer to buy every team of one of these leagues? How about that?
I was gonna also toss women's IPL cricket into this mix to see.
You and I were stunned at those numbers of those teams. Yeah.
The numbers they sold a bunch of teams for over $100 million a couple of years ago.
And by the way,
listeners,
listeners,
never played before.
Eben does not go more than an hour in the office these days without turning to me and saying, "Oh, I'm so excited! Bangladesh plays whoever today." He has become a new the foremost expert in cricket since he went to the match out on Long Island.
Well, we will discuss that next week. Shout out to Kurt Bodenhausen. Thank you very much for joining us. You can find him on Twitter at @KBodenhausen.
Kurt, we should discuss now. Let's see if he screws it up. Now he's all live on YouTube.
Novi_.
It's live.
Williams.
Did you welcome our view? Thank you for joining us. Anything? Was there no change? You have to have the ability
and Aaron Greenewald,
to do
who
this.
will chop this and get it ready.
Thank you, YouTube
professionally
people.
For you podcast listeners.
There it is.
Sportico's digital media editor Cora Veltman would like you to know that you can follow the show at Sporticast, which is the hub of the Sportico Media Network. And thanks to everyone who tuned in.
Oh, now
live.
he threw it in. Come
Hopefully
on.
we will be doing more of this in the future.
Terrible.